everyone. This is Emery. Emery Cypress. It's a little fussy. I am going to attempt to share my birth story. Definitely did not go the way as planned. I had been hoping to have an unmedicated VBAC. For those of you that have no clue what VBAC is, it stands for vaginal birth after cesarean. My doctor cleared me for a VBAC back at the beginning of our pregnancy with stipulations that I had to go into labor on my own. So I bounced on my ball for several weeks and did some spinning babies exercises, things I could do that would help engage baby's head into my pelvis to hopefully help that process. But if you watch our videos, then you know at 36 weeks, Trevor was out of town and I started having contractions again. It's a couple hours in at this point and they were painful. I got in the bathtub, they wouldn't cease. And I'm kind of starting to stress because I'm like, do I need to call our moms? But our moms both had work the next day because obviously somebody would have had to come keep Savannah and somebody would have had to take me to the hospital. So I'm trying to determine if this is real labor or not, and they're coming pretty consistent. About that time, Trevor shows up at the door and I was not expecting him until the next day, but something told him, come home. And I'm glad he did. We went into labor and delivery around 1 a.m. that morning, and my contractions were consistent, and the nurses were convinced that we were possibly having a baby, so they admitted us. They admitted us overnight, and we stayed several more hours, and by shift change, my contractions had fizzled out, and they deemed it as prodromal labor and sent me home. So that was pretty frustrating, but it did dilate me to 1 centimeter. Or 2 days before that at my appointment, I was still, cervix still closed. So I was like, oh, we've got, a little bit of progress. This is looking hopeful. I think 2 more weeks went by and I would have hours of contractions. Well, one night I couldn't sleep through them. Contractions all night long, and it more felt like back labor. It wasn't the same, but it was painful. And so we went in on a Saturday morning. And, are you fussy? Oh, you just ate. You can't be hungry again. And my contractions weren't as consistent as the first time, and it ended up just being some irritation more than anything, so they gave me a Vistarel so that I could sleep, and that was that. I continued to have contractions for weeks, and all it did was kept me at 1 centimeter, and it softened my cervix, but my cervix was still high, and she only dropped just a little bit. So I went in for my 40-week appointment. Obviously, I was still the same. Doctor asked me how bad I didn't want a repeat C-section. So I let her know that it was pretty bad, that I was set on having a VBAC, did not want a repeat C-section. So I'm really, at this point, trying to get her to gently induce me, because I've heard of several successful VBACs from gently inducing, because they could not use a lot of Pitocin. I couldn't have the pill they insert to ripen your cervix, because all of that stuff can cause a uterine rupture, which can be deadly for me and the baby. It's rare, but it does happen, which would send us into an emergency C-section, which obviously we did not want. So she sent me back for ultrasound to see how baby was doing, baby size, fluids, all that stuff. And she was measuring just as big as her sister. Fluids were good. She did offer to give me another week to go and see if labor would start on its own. But since she was a big baby and we knew that, and because of all our concerns this whole pregnancy, and because we're more, well, you just have to worry about all kinds of things going over your due date, I had to go back to work in a couple of weeks. So if we ended up with a C-section, I wanted to go ahead and get it over with. So I knew that this baby needed to come on her due date for several reasons. Unfortunately, despite what I wanted, we scheduled our C-section for noon the next day. So I went to my car and I cried for a few hours, and I went and saw my chiropractor, hoping that maybe, you know, she could adjust me, and because I was having contractions all through the day, so I was like, maybe she'll adjust me and then maybe my body will just go into full-blown labor. My contractions grew consistent, but then of course they tapered off again. So at that point I said it's time for me to get my mind right for this scheduled C-section and accept that it is what it is. Went to bed that night. I slept great. Thankfully, I guess didn't have any more contractions, because I would have been frustrated if false labor contractions would have kept me up all night. I got up the next morning, woke up around 5 a.m. I enjoyed my last bath for a few weeks because I am a sucker for baths. I do not like showers. So I enjoyed that nice last soak while I listened to worship music and got my mind right. I did my hair and makeup. Our preacher called and prayed with us, and that really helped settle all of my worries. And the reason I didn't want to repeat C-section was because with Savannah, I didn't realize it at the time, I guess, but you could say I had a lot of built up fears from that experience. It up in my mind. I wanted an unmedicated VBAC. I didn't want anything else go in my spine. Obviously didn't want epidural unless absolutely necessary. There were several reasons. Obviously, normally a natural delivery, the recovery time is a lot better than a C-section, because C-sections, we all know, are major surgeries. I had my reasons, accepted the fact that there was a reason unknown to us that we were scheduling this C-section, and God had the best intentions for our mindsets. We got there, and I did not really want a whole lot of visitors this go around, mainly just because I felt like this whole process has been emotional, the last 2 years has been emotional, and I just wanted a relaxing environment. The anesthesiologist came in to talk to me before surgery. I explained to them and my nurse what happened the first go around with my C-section and how I was nervous to have the spinal done. They take me back to the OR, and of course I'm nervous because I'm going in there, I'm all by myself. I had the anesthesiologist, and they hand me a pillow to do my spinal, and I was like, this is all I get. And then in runs the nurse, and so I was able to kind of hold on to her, and they did the spinal. It went in perfectly fine the first try, and they laid me down, and then my blood pressure dropped. At the time, I didn't know what was going on. I just started saying, I don't feel really well. As I'm looking up at the ceiling, I just said, I don't feel, and they're like, oh no, it's fine, it's just the medicine running through you. I was like, I don't feel well, and if I was like, I feel like somebody's sitting on my chest. And I felt like I couldn't breathe. I started to get nauseous. I was super hot. It was a mess, and so I'm trying not to panic, because obviously if you panic, you know, they do threaten to put you completely under, and panicking does not help. I did not tell them that I felt like I couldn't breathe, because I felt like if I voiced that I would believe it and I would panic. At this point, I'm laying on the OR table, and I was like, yep, that's it. I'm done having kids. Like, we said we were done, but yep, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. They're putting medicine through me, and finally they got enough in me to get me stable and, you know, back where I needed to be. They come in and, you know, they're prepping for surgery, and they're naming off my name and all the important stuff to make sure I'm the right patient they need to be operating on. I'm just daydreaming at this point. They're, you know, asking me all these questions, and I'm not even answering them. It was pretty funny because I was just in a whole other world. And they start the surgery. They bring Trevor in and my photographer in, and as soon as they pulled her out of my stomach, it's like, oh my goodness, I feel like a new woman. They brought her around, and I couldn't see her face because her head was tilted back. All I saw was her body, and I was like, oh, that's a big baby, because the doctor was like, oh, that's a big head, and then she's like, oh, that's a big baby. And whenever I saw the size of this child, I was like, oh, that is a really big baby. And so right then that kind of, you know, okay, we made the right choice, because we could have been in a bad situation. Could I have tried to VBAC with the size of this kid? Took her over to the warmer to do all the necessary stuff, and then I start hearing the nurses talking about oxygen levels and blood sugar levels and just all kinds of things about her heart, and I'm like, this does not sound good at all. And then Trevor came and walked over and said, hey, they think she needs to go to the NICU, but we can send her to the nursery and they can do a little bit more work on her. Her oxygen's really low, and then if they need to send her to the NICU, they can send her to the NICU. And I said, well, given the circumstance, you know, it's probably better to just send her to the NICU from the get-go. So they let him hold her for just a minute before they took her to the NICU, brought her over, but he literally put her like this up to my head. So all I saw was the back of her head. So I didn't see her, and of course, you know, I'm upset because my baby has to go to the NICU. I'm not going to get skin to skin time. So I didn't even say, hey, you know, turn around, let me touch her. I could have gotten that this time where I didn't get that with Savannah, but I didn't even think about it because my mind was just, you know, what's wrong with my baby? And of course they weighed her before they took her back, because whenever they said 10 pounds, 5 ounces, I was like, oh, that's a big baby. So I said, yeah, it should be done, because if we have another one, it's liable to be 12 pounds at this rate. So they took her to the NICU, and it was probably the most bittersweet thing. I did cry, but I knew she was in good hands, and I knew it would be okay, and it could be a whole different scenario. I was thankful that it wasn't worse, but it was pretty bittersweet as they wheeled me back to my room, because I didn't have a baby in my hands, and we had some family there, and in I roll, no baby, which at that point they knew. Trevor had stepped out and told them, you know, the situation, that she was in the NICU, and gave them an update on me. Definitely not the birth I had envisioned. Like I said, I planned for an unmedicated VBAC. I did not get my VBAC and had to schedule a C-section at that, and so it just, I wasn't sure the outcome of how this delivery was going to be, and of course she gets hauled off to the NICU. I wanted if I had to get a C-section, I wanted the clear drape so I could see everything. They didn't have a clear drape. I didn't get to do skin to skin. Trevor didn't get the footage we needed in the OR. It just, I mean, this whole pregnancy though, like I told Trevor, I said from the get-go, none of this has gone as planned. And so I'm thankful for my healthcare team, but honestly, this whole experience had been so much better than Savannah's delivery. My overall emotional standpoint has been so much better this go around. My recovery has been better. When I left the hospital, I looked alive and happy, whereas with Savannah, I looked like death. I apologize for all the background noise. My toddler has crashed this party. But here she is, all 10 pounds, 5 ounces. She is 2 weeks old today. We just had our 2-week checkup and we are back up to birth weight. Look at those rolls. Not the birth I had planned, but it's okay because she's here safely. We're complete. We are so happy. We love her so much. Her big sister thinks the world of her. Thank y'all for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.